welcome to the World Open Innovation Conversations. My name is Marcel Bogers. I'm a professor of open and collaborative innovation at Eindhoven University of Technology.
My name is Marisol Menéndez, and I'm an open innovation practitioner and enthusiast.
And we're very happy to be joined here by Aurelia Engelsberger. Both Marisol and I know you, I think, quite well. We've been working together in different ways, even on research and for the World Open Innovation Conference. But for those who don't know you, Aurelia, first of all, welcome and thanks for joining our podcast here. Can you say a little bit more about yourself and your background? And then we'll follow up with some more questions for you afterwards.
Yeah, of course. Thank you very much for the invitation, Marisol and Marcel. I'm very happy to be here. So I'm Aurelia Engelsberger. I'm born and raised in Germany. Right now I live in Munich, but I also stayed a couple of years abroad here and there. But I can also talk about it a little bit later. Right now I'm the CEO of OMIND Platform. That's a company that supports organization during their transformation processes. And I founded that company based on my PhD, which I did on the intersection of open innovation in HR. And by background, I'm actually an organizational psychologist. So I think that's about me as much as you need to know at the beginning.
No, and I think, thanks for that introduction. And as you say, I think what I think I personally also find interesting about your journey is, as you say, you move from the PhD to actually starting that company. So really sort of bridging theory and practice in the way that we like to talk about it as well within our community. And you are sort of living that life. So I think it would be really interesting to hear a little bit more about that journey, sort of how and maybe why did you decide to move from the academic setting to more practice, and especially with launching your own company. Can you share some more details about that, the why and how of that story?
Yeah, actually, there is a little bit more to add because I didn't just move from the theory to practice, but I actually moved from practice to theory and then to practice. So I actually started working as I was 16 with an apprenticeship at the bank, and I was working for 5 years at the bank. And then I realized, maybe I don't want to sell insurances my whole life. So I started actually a bachelor's degree in business administration, really classic. But then I focused on HR because I realized I'm really interested in the people and how they make decisions. And even the bachelor's in business administration was, from my point of view, not enough about the people. So I did my master's degree in psychology. And then from there, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into research because next to my studies and also after my studies, I've worked in different industries in people development, organizational development. So I've gained a lot of practical experiences, especially when it comes to how to shape cultures and how to motivate people. And I thought there's a little bit more needed to understand about that. And this is why then from practice, I moved again to theory and did my PhD on that field. So I knew exactly from my experiences in practice what I want to understand better in theory. And during my PhD, then I thought, okay, I definitely want to do that research to bring it back into the field. That was my motivation.
This is very interesting because, as Marcel says, we really enjoy reading practice and theory in the various activities that we do all the time, and you've lived that as well in the World Open Innovation Conference. This is something that we are continuously trying to work on. But it seems that sometimes you have separate roles, separate people doing that, and then you can create communication. But it's especially interesting, this way of going back to theory, bringing that to practice, and trying to do this continuous intertwining of both worlds. Now that you are dedicated to your own company, how do you bring that back to theory, and how do you continue living this bridging of the both worlds?
Yeah, to be honest, Marisol, that's such a big challenge because I feel like sometimes I'm living two lives. it's really difficult to bridge it, to be honest. Like, it's a very big challenge. Like, I realized that even coming from practice and then doing my PhD, I felt that was a completely different world. I was like, this is so theoretically, like changing your mindset and to understand more the theory behind it, and then bringing it back into practice again. I had a lot of problems then also, explaining what I have researched in easy language so that practitioners understand what I'm trying to say. So there was a really big learning curve for myself. And now we're trying to make it easy, understandable for our customers what we do, and really break it down into practical language. But at the same time, we still do research because we work together closely with universities. We always apply for funding projects, especially right now in the field of AI. We do a lot of research on that together with universities, and we keep doing new research and applying it into practice. But I feel like the biggest challenge is the language, to be honest, because the problems are everywhere the same, kind of, we both need each other. Theory needs practice, so research and universities needs companies and the other way around. But I feel like the language is the biggest challenge, and also the way of working, because also with the World of Innovation Conference, you bring together researchers and practitioners, but then I feel like even when you look at meeting schedules or whatever, practitioners are doing meetings very different than researchers would do them, like the structure, the way of working, the timing, like everything. And I think that's a big hurdle, and that's why maybe there is not so much close intersection, because it's a totally different way of communicating and also working, to be honest.
This is you mentioned the word mindset, and you use the mindset in part of your research. I feel that this is a way that you approach part of the work you do. Do you want to intro what are you thinking about with that?
Yeah, I feel like in the end, when it comes to organizations who want to be more innovative, it's about the people, right? Because like an organization, is built of a lot of people, and there needs to be a holistic approach how you can be innovative. And for that holistic approach, first of all, the people need to be ready to be innovative, and this is what I call a mindset, to be willing and open to change and adapt, But on the other hand, also in the organization, there needs to be structural changes and measurements and support systems. And this is what I call, HR measurements or policies or whatever. And the combination of both is what actually fosters an open and innovative culture in an organization. But I'm personally very convinced that even if a company has all the systems in place, if the people are not open and ready for it, then it's not going to last for long, And just talking also about bridging the gap and different ways of working, one big success factor for an open mindset is empathy, to also understand different perspectives, being able to put yourself into the other perspective of your counterpart, and to understand that, and practicing that helps, to be open to change, to be more innovative, to accept new solutions, and also to bridge the gap between theory and practice.
Marcel, this made me think of our discussions about absorptive capacity. Is that related?
Well, I mean, what I was thinking, I mean, in the end, it's funny because I think there are you hear many stories also from the practice side about, and I mean, what you described is a perfect example of where theory and practice don't always meet, right? Because of course we can really unpack this whole mindset concept, but it's exactly something that, first of all, people talk about a lot. It's one of those easy words like, okay, you need the right mindset, but first of all, what does it mean in theory is already a kind of a challenging question. But then indeed, how do you translate that to practice? That's exactly what you're describing, of course. But indeed, for me, it also relates to your point on the absorptive capacity issue is about, are people also ready? Which is partly about, okay, do you have the prior knowledge to work with external people or information, which is what absorptive capacity is all about. But also the whole point of I think what you said, Aurelia, has been the people also need to be open, right? So we would talk about open innovation, and then I would typically say, yeah, of course, the first step is you open the doors, let's say, one way or the other, right? So you create mechanisms to get this knowledge flowing across organizational boundaries, as we would call it. But then it needs to sort of land also inside. And I think this is also what you are, I think, alluding to a little bit, Marisol, like, okay, how do you really make that happen and get the people ready? And that would also be kind of my follow-up question, if we can delve a little bit more into that, because I think it's exactly one of those things where many companies would also struggle, because strategically you can say, yeah, we can open up, but how do you get those people ready? And you mentioned, okay, there are structures and systems and measures, but what, I mean, what are some more critical factors that companies should consider, and how have you, of course, worked with it with your company?
Mm. Yeah, that's a very good question, because yeah, you're totally right. I feel like on every conference, everyone talks about the mindset, but then who is actually investing into changing a mindset in a company? And I feel like a lot of companies nowadays, they think if they invite someone to hold a keynote about it, and inspire their people, or have a one-time workshop about, being ready for change, that would inspire the people enough for long-lasting change. But that's not what happens, right? It's what I found in my research, and what we also experience every day now in the company, is that it's about creating tiny habits. It's about, first of all, being open, but then also from there establishing routines, right? And how do you do that? It's definitely a big challenge in organizations with thousands of people. Make sure that each individual is establishing small routines, right? So that's why what we do with OMIND is we create a status quo of each and everyone's mindset with the help of our digital tool. So they see where they are at, they see their strength, and they also see their grow areas. And then based on that, our software nudges the people and reminds them in their daily life to actually establish routines, so that they bring a strategy really into practice. And we don't only focus on the open mindset, because, it also needs to have a context on what needs to get into practice, right? It doesn't help if you're just open for everything. In the companies, it's all about having a pain, because if you don't have a pain that is related to financial metrics, then you're not going to invest into it. So what we do is we always put the mindset change in the context of, for example, a new strategy, a new innovation strategy, but it could also be nowadays a new restructuring strategy, right? And based on that, we derive actions that the employees need to do on a daily or weekly rhythm. And this is what they get reminded to, what they measure, what they can track their progress on. And then obviously there's an incentive and reward system related to a gamification approach that will then motivate the people to really bring these mindsets and strategies into a very busy daily life.
And then so that's obviously something you have worked with over the years, and with your company and your clients and so on. So what are some key learnings over the years from your side of how you have improved certain things, and what is it that you are practically doing? I mean, what would you sort of sell to potential clients, so to say, right? To convince them that this is something that they would really benefit from?
Well, if I can be very transparent here, I think my biggest learning was that most of the companies, they say how important culture and mindset is for them, but they only invest into it if there's really a return on invest. And if there's no return on invest, they wouldn't invest in it, because obviously a company is there to make profit, right? And as much as we all talk about how important the mindset and the culture is, it needs to have a financial benefit. And this is also my biggest learning, is something our company has then developed into, that we can measure the return on invest into investing into people, and this is why it's so important to put it in the context of a real transformation process or real strategy, that you can show these new behavioral patterns, these new routines, for example, this usage of tools where companies pay thousands of licenses fees, which are usually not really used in a company, that later on they're getting used because new routines have been established, that saves the company a lot of costs, at least opportunity costs. And calculating that and making this translation into the head for decision makers to see, okay, if I invest in my people and the mindset and their culture and their routines, that actually saves me money in the long run. I think this was my biggest learning, because to be honest, after my PhD, I started naively translating my PhD into practice and thought everyone would naturally agree that the mindset and the culture is the key success factor in the long run for a company. But actually, it's just about financial metrics.
Well, this is interesting because it also touches this element about the KPIs. No, the KPIs of innovation have always been like this mysterious topic that has a lot to talk about, and I think part of the complications is because first you need to define what is important to you, and it always ends up in financial results, as you are saying, but you can say like current results or future results or how fast. No, depends on that. And also, we can talk about other implications about these KPIs. No, they always say that measuring alters behavior, as you are really nicely stating right now, and you can say it work, but it also needs to be adapted through the company's life. Have you seen this working as companies evolve as well?
What exactly do you mean?
Like, how does this change through time? Do they need to keep adapting? Do they need to keep learning, but also always keeping related to the financial results, you know?
Well, yeah, companies always need to adapt and learn, and based on that, also the financial metrics change, right? Like based on the strategies or based on the transformation they're going through. The outcomes are changing, right? And that changes over time. So yes, we've been working with companies for 5 years now, and like we started with totally different financial metrics that were important for them at the beginning, and then we went together on a learning journey, you know. And also, I mean, I don't need to tell you how much has changed in economy the last 5 years, you know. So the company strategies has changed rapidly, and obviously with that also the strategies and the behaviors the employees need to adapt. To be honest, like 5 years ago, we've started with a company with a very disruptive innovation strategy. You know, they all wanted to invest into disruptive innovation, and now we're running a cost-cutting strategy with them. You know, and just train the people into how they can cut costs in their daily life. You know, and again, also new routines, new practices, other financial models than 5 years ago, or other financial metrics than 5 years ago.
So how do you then concretely work with them? Because I think it's really interesting, because you have a platform also, right, that you use. Maybe you can anyway say a little bit more about it. But my understanding from you is that it's obviously much more than just implementing a platform, but it's really about everything like around it and the routines and the behavior. But how do you practically work with that also with those companies? Is it like through workshops, or you train the trainers, or how do you
Yeah.
do that more practically?
Yeah, that's a that's a very good question. We started actually as a software company and just sold a platform,
Exactly.
but then we realized what you also just say, Marcel. It's way more than that. You know, it's really enabling the people in their daily life to do it. So we actually, what we do right now is we bring whatever strategy a company has into practice, and first we start with sitting together at the C-level, having like a strategy workshop, understanding what a strategy actually is, because that's also sometimes way different than it's written in their strategy paper. Really sitting down and understanding what they want to achieve in the next 5 years, and based on that derive actions, you know, and goals. And they might be very different from location to location, from department to department. That's also something that we do together with companies. And then based on that, we derive, really practical routines. And then, when we have that, we bring all the people together in workshops. We onboard them. They go through 3 workshops within 4 months. And at the same time, they also use the software that within the workshops, they're not going to stop working on it and go back to their desk and go back to the old routines. But the software will remind them. And then the next workshop, we look at the results, the KPIs, what has been achieved, what do we need to fine-tune and further work on, and then we go into another software phase, and then we meet again. So a hybrid model. And at the end of the 4 months, we meet together and look at the KPIs. We look what we have achieved, how much money we have saved, how much we have applied the strategies more into practice, what has changed. Look at the success stories, and then we present that to the C-level back. And then from there, we see what new problems we have found on the way. Because when you start working with people on bringing strategy into practice, then on the way you identify a lot of new challenges in an organization, what actually hinders the employees to bring that strategy into practice. And then either we continue because we found new challenges to solve, or we are done and the company has saved money.
This is so interesting. During the practice of open innovation in all these many years, I've seen the open innovation department hosted or in different departments across the organization, from maybe technology to the CEO office. But I even have seen it in the HR department. There's this one company here who is the promoter of the open innovation activities across the organization, the procurement department. So I think each strategy shows different elements, but for me, the overall learning is that we need everyone. I'm curious from your own perspective and in this practice stemming from your own psychology and your HR background, how do you see the involvement of the HR department and the general people culture and people management in the role of OI?
Are you asking in the best practice scenario or in reality?
We can spoke to both Aurelias.
Well, I think in the best practice scenario, obviously HR should be the role model and also, drive the cultural change. And obviously, as you said, in the end, we need everyone. I agree that we need everyone, but also depending on the strategy that we need to bring in practice, right? Like for certain strategies, you don't need every person in an organization, but you have a group of stakeholders that you need to have on board. And then what we usually do is that we start with a group of people as a multiplier, and then this from there creates a snowball effect, and then these multipliers also, train the other people. You also mentioned train the trainer before. So we also enable the organization to do the change by themselves, so we train HR, the HR department, that they can train their own employees because we want to enable the organization to lead the change. But in practice, usually we do the workshops and everything because HR is still, at least what we have experienced so far, very much administrational focused. So there's a lot of overload in administration task and not that much in people development or cultural changes. So this is why most of our clients, they don't have capacity in their HR development department to lead such a change. So this is why they would outsource it and we do it for them. We take the responsibility, but we also bring in the capacity. But this being said, we also focus on the German medium-sized companies. So for multinational companies that can look different, we also have one big multinational client which then does the trainer system because they have a big HR development department and they have educated trainers. But if we look at the German medium-sized companies, they have a few people in the HR department, and that's mainly administration.
Yes, I was going to ask you also about your experience with different sort of types and sizes of companies, but I think, as you say, it's mostly you've been working with the sort of mid-sized companies. So I suppose in that sense you do see quite a difference in terms of or let me put it as a question, because what I hear you say is also let's say the organizational structure in a way also plays an important role in how you can really enable any kind of cultural change. And of course, having the different silos and so on can really be a hampering factor. So have you seen also different types of organizational structures or maybe approaches to different, for different, let's say, clients, different companies you've been working with? And is there anything that's kind of if you find interesting to share with us?
Yeah, I think there are very big differences when it comes to culture and the sizes of organizations, and just what I mentioned when it comes to HR, right? How big is HR, and what is actually the task of HR, right? But at the same time, the mid-sized companies are actually the one who are going through the biggest transformations at the moment, so they actually need a lot of speed and capacity in that. So when you ask me about the differences, when we work with a medium-sized company, then we usually take the whole organization on board. So we would start with a couple of hundreds of people, and then every half a year we would take another couple of hundreds, and depending on how many couple of hundreds are in the organization, then you can actually onboard the entire organization, or at least a good amount of it. Like we usually aim to have 20% of the entire organization, because from there it can create a snowball effect. With huge multinational organizations where you have like 10,000, hundreds of thousands employees, obviously that's a bit more difficult. And then we would look for departments. We would look for even locations, and then onboard location by location or department by department, and break the organization down into smaller groups. And you would also find subcultures in big like the bigger the organization, the more subcultures you have, right? And the more you need to adapt also such cultural programs to the subcultures. So that becomes way more complex. And then different languages, different cultural backgrounds are also to consider. So that's why it is a way more complex project than in small organizations.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, it kind of reiterates the point that you can do as much open innovation as you want. You also want to make sure that sort of the internal openness, if you call it like that, is really in order to enable that, right? And it also, I mean, to bring in another sort of classic concept of not invented here, syndrome, right? Which also relates quite a bit more to the mindset related or cultural related issues, and something I think we know about many decades already. But on the one hand, I think what you describe somehow talks about sort of, let's say, even internal, not invented here, almost like, okay, because I can imagine if you maybe, whether it's coming from HR or any of those other departments that Marisol also mentioned, the question is, how do you actually get your organization on board? And you say you have a whole process for that. So I guess it also relates to that notion of, are people willing to accept this sort of idea and the different way of working? Do you see any particular challenges in that?
Yeah, just recently we worked with a big with the international company. It's actually German based, but it's internationally it's international on the market. Approximately 10,000 employees, and yeah, with them we were mainly working on breaking down the silos in between the organization. And two of our dimensions that we train in our mindset program are the positive attitude towards knowledge sharing and the positive attitude towards knowledge sourcing. So actually the counterpart of the not invented here and the not sold here syndrome. And based on our measurements, that was also the biggest problem in that organization, especially between the production department and the business and corporate departments. There was a very big gap, big silos between them, because it was a company that was producing, like a production company. So there was a big silo in between the production and the corporate part. And our goal was mainly breaking down the silos and establishing positive attitudes towards knowledge sharing and sourcing in between these departments internally.
Okay, yeah, exactly. So that's more the internal openness, right?
Yeah.
And if we relate it to more sort of to the whole idea of open innovation, which is about knowledge sharing and sourcing, let's say across, of course, the organizational boundaries, what are some key learnings with respect to not invented here, not shared here, or are there any particular also cultural mindset related issues that you have seen over the years that are particularly problematic or critical to work with?
Well, to be honest, we started off with open innovation as a strategy that we want to support organizations with. And over the years, we have realized that too little companies really take that serious, to be honest. So that's why when I talk about my company, we don't only do open innovation anymore. We bring every strategy into practice because open innovation is just the smallest step, the least strategy, to be honest, that companies take seriously, which is super sad because as a researcher, I'm very convinced that collaboration across organizations is more important than ever before. But what I see is that most of the companies, they collaborate, but then they collaborate very loose, not with proper strategies, more if the CEO knows another CEO and they trust each other on a personal level, this is why they would collaborate. This is talking about medium-sized companies, and this is obviously not always the case. I'm just saying this is what I've experienced so far, that medium-sized organizations not really taking an open innovation strategy into their portfolio, to be honest. We're actually very happy if we see that they have innovation strategies. But when we look at the multinational big organizations, then obviously that looks a little bit different. That's more organized. They might even have someone, like one person, that is responsible for open innovation. But then it's mainly startup scouting or matchmaking or something like that. It's like for them, they see open innovation more, like if they are the big corporate, they see open innovation more as the collaboration with startups. But to be honest, I was also a little bit frustrated to see how it actually looks, as at least on the German market when it comes to open innovation, and that the willingness and also the readiness to invest money for it is not as much as I thought it would be.
Interesting. I was now also thinking about the element of your researcher side, paired up with your practitioner side. With all these insights that you shared with us, if you could continue researching, or if you see an open challenge in research, what would you tell other academies? This is an open question. Go and research here. What are the areas that you are looking at?
It's a very good question. I think just learning how much the return on invest is important for organizations. I feel like the researchers should in general focus more on what is the actual outcome for an organization. And I'm looking back at my PhD, I had great recommendations for actions. And I think, to build a conducive culture that fosters innovation is a great outcome. But now being in industry for a few years, I know that's not measurable, that's not tangible enough, So I think the measurement and the correlation to financial metrics is way more important than ever before. And I think, looking back at the human side of open innovation and then actual financial outcomes for an organization, I think that's very critical, and not hypothetical outcomes, but really, tangible financial outcomes.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent point. And I mean, to be honest, it probably took me until, 2 years ago to have a first paper that properly has sort of financial performance as the outcome variable, right? And of course, we look at often also qualitative research. Of course, we're more interested in the mechanisms and the underlying processes, right? So you of course cannot measure everything, but I I think it's important to see it in the broader light, which we maybe tend to forget. But even in our sort of more quantitative empirical papers, we often look at maybe, innovation as an outcome variable, which is only part of the bigger story. And of course, we've been talking about that quite a bit also in some of the work we've been doing together, of course. But I've also seen it more generally, even in my own work, but also with for others, that relating it ultimately to what matters for those companies is really quite critical. So I think that's a really excellent call for research in that sense. Yeah. Maybe it's a good way to close the podcast also. It means there is some more work to do on the researcher side, but also on the practitioner side. And I think it was really inspirational to hear your story, your background, the journey you've personally went through. So hopefully that can also inspire others, but also, of course, the actual topic you're working with on open innovation, but also realizing how that is actually part of a bigger story. So I think that's a really good reminder for many of us. So yeah, thanks for sharing that. Really appreciate it. Anything to add on your side, Marisol, before we close?
No, I think I always enjoy so much these detailed conversations about how we are living these practices in companies. I agree with Aurelia that not everything is open innovation, but at the end, we learn so much about the open innovation mindset to apply to many other practices. So I think this is a good takeout also from your conversation, Aurelia. Thank you very much for sharing. And thank you very much for sharing also your own story, which is inspirational for others.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. And I would just like to add, I think it's today more important than ever before to also do research in the field of open innovation and the human side to show, financial outcomes for organizations. And then maybe more also medium-sized organizations would invest into these strategies because they would see their financial benefits, So I just would like to motivate and inspire everyone to do more research on that.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for that. And thanks again. And thanks everybody for listening to our podcast. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Bye.